Welcome to yet another game analysis video. Today I'm trying out a slightly different format in which I analyze two games that share a lot of similarities with each other and then compare the two with each other. For this first time round, I pitted Chants of Sennaar and Homicipher against one another. They both boast their main gameplay to be around deciphering a language. The added reason why I'm pitting these two against each other is 1. I fully completed both of these, and 2. I get really angry with one of these and pleasantly surprised by the other. You can now place your bets on which one it's going to be. Some very brief introductions. I'm a big nerd who has played thousands of games across all genres and platforms. I've been slowly getting into game analysis and have a few videos on it at this point. I also have a list of games I've played and some quick takes on them, so you can have an overview of what kinds of games I do and don't enjoy. There's lots of personal opinions in that list, so do be warned, we won't agree on anything. There will be a link to it in the description and the pinned comment. Quick little note about spoilers. Me in the editing room will now show a few timestamps on the screen with sections where I will spoil big parts of these two games. These spoilers will be near the later half of the video as part of the in-depth analysis. I will also give you an auditory warning beforehand in case you're just listening to this on a different screen. And then let's get into the meat of the video. I'm going to start by giving a quick factual overview of both games. We'll start with Chants of Sennaar. Chants of Sennaar is a 2023 game about exploring a Tower of Babel-inspired tower and deciphering languages of the people living there, while slowly restoring the bonds between people. It's about as indie as it gets. It's 6 people on the developer credit list, and a few more names for the publisher and a bunch of soundtrack voice acting related names. It's also their second game ever, their first game being a rather unsuccessful arena fighter game. Reviews on Steam for Chants of Sennaar have surpassed a total of 23,000, with 98% of them being positive. It was nominated for a BAFTA in video games, and was also nominated and even won a few titles on some smaller game award shows. That's the broad details on Chants of Sennaar, moving on to Homicipher. Homicipher is a 2024 visual novel Otomo-style game based on the theme of romance with horror men. The protagonist has found herself in a strange place with many gentlemen of the horror variety that all speak another worldly language. You decipher their language as you try and stay alive. If you thought Chants of Sennaar was a small dev team, there's only one name in the credits on all the roles for this game. Just like Chants of Sennaar, also the second game, this dev has another Otome game that is a Japan release only, so I don't have a whole lot of detail on that. It has considerably less reviews than Chants of Sennaar, clocking at 6,500 reviews with a 96% positive review score. That's it for the quick overview of both of these games. So quickly, why are we talking about language games specifically today? I am rather passionate about my translation games, which is rough. There's not a whole lot of them out there. I will take recommendations, but please wait with giving them until the end of this, so you have an understanding on how I view these games. I started looking into translations games after what I, to this day, still believe is the best translation game ever made. It's part of Glittermitten Grove, or Frog Fractions 2, or Text Adventureland, whatever you want to call it really. This video is not about that masterpiece, however. I won't spoil what it entails. However, what happened after I played that, I started looking into translation games. I was rather unsuccessful for the longest time. Most translation games have their translation part be very gimmicky. It took about 4 years between the moment of playing Frog Fractions 2 and the moment I found my very first game that made me go, finally, somebody made something I want. This next section will be about my experience and analysis on Chants of Sennaar, which is the game I then found. And despite my initial optimism, I came to first get disappointed, then annoyed, and later thoroughly frustrated with Chants of Sennaar. Made me feel like a real grouch too, considering how critically acclaimed it was. I am going to analyze what's about the first 20% of Chants of Sennaar. This is your spoiler warning for Chants of Sennaar, by the way. There's gonna be some pretty heavy early game spoilers. We're saving some of the ending story spoilers for later. Chants of Sennaar is composed of 5 acts, most of them pretty similar in gameplay. This analysis will be fully on Act 1 and just a little bit of Act 2. Chants of Sennaar starts with a cut to the main character waking up in an unknown place, in an unknown machine, and also your origins and what you are, all unknown. Click to move around, click to interact with stuff, simple as that. You can highlight interactable items in the environment, really nice quality of life thing. We will be walking around empty hallways a lot. We find our very first door and our very first interaction with a foreign language. Luckily, the lever in this particular door is labeled, which means with context clues we can figure out the correct translations for the words on the lever. Initially, there's a lot to like about Chants of Sennaar. I love the fact that I can type in my suspicion on words, that my hunch shows up whenever the word shows up in the world. It saves a whole lot of time on manual translation and makes it so that pen and paper to assist your game experience is not really necessary. But that also brings us to the moment in Chants of Sennaar that made me worried, albeit not in this first instance, but rather upon seeing its consequence. After doing a little puzzle here, where you need to figure out how the levers need to be positioned, based on the words you just learned, the game presents you with your journal, 3 drawings and 3 gaps to drag glyphs in. Dragging glyphs that match the image, and the glyphs you dragged in will be validated. Whatever guess you had on the words gets removed, and the game will tell you the correct translation. This is also where the game started losing me slowly. First, I didn't think too bad of it. The first few words are very simple, and its official translation matched my own findings. However, it is at the second section of this level that things started to look dicey. You walk past a few stone carvings with text under them, some in various states of disrepair. You are presented with 4 images of figures you just saw on the carvings. They're really easy to match to their respective glyphs, so you'll easily match the glyphs to the drawings as well. And that's where things start looking weird. The man-person translation you'll probably do yourself, that one's not so difficult. The other 3 are much more ambiguous. They show 2 differently dressed types of people and a tower with an icon above it. Whatever you thought those might be, throw your translations out of the window because the game will just tell you that these are devotees, wardens, and God. That's not something you could have possibly found out at this stage. You might have had a hunch, but to have it verified outright this early is a choice to say the least. The game will do this throughout the entire game, where it gives you easy to match glyphs and exact translations. It makes the player pretty lazy. You stop figuring out translations, most of the time you just match 2 out of 3 images on the journal and then you just hard force the other one that's left. You skip entire processes of deducing words for yourself. It's incredibly disheartening. But that's not all there is to it. I mentioned that this system has more consequences. Because here's the other thing. Once you have confirmed all glyphs in a sentence, the game will fully translate the sentence for you. Not just glyph by glyph, but full on any grammatical constructions as well. To give a very brief example, in the first section of the game, you can see the glyph for human. If you would read the glyphs as they are, a sentence could say, human, praise God. It's because part of this language's grammar is that whenever something is plural, they use the same glyph twice. So it would actually be, humans praise God. The thing is, if you've confirmed all words in the sentence, the game will automatically translate this to humans instead of human for you. I can hear your issue though. So what if the game auto-translates the grammar for you? So what if you don't get to have the clever feeling of figuring this out for yourself? While I'm tempted to agree with you and say to each their own, I want you to, for now, just remember that the game auto-translates any grammatical constructions for you, because we will get back to it. Most translation work serves puzzle elements. Learn words, figure out how to read a code, execute code. This is trivialized due to the automatic translation of words. As long as you find any clue and translate the words, the clue boils down to just go here, do this thing. My honest opinion, those are instructions, not puzzling, but I digress. Because apart from puzzles, these people have nothing to say. You get teased on another language pretty early on, but NPCs in this world either exist to A, help you figure out words, or B, help you progress a puzzle. They have no personality, no aspiration, no goals. They are just here. They are much more stereotypes than anything else. These people, that we now know for sure are called devotees, by the way, are all very distraught that they are not allowed in the tower to pray. And the wardens have big swords and restrict access. Speaking of wardens, once you're done with this act, you move on to their zone and have to start translating an entirely new language. Because by now you've learned most of the devotees' words. The wardens are just as stereotypical as the devotees. No individuality, just swing sword, march around, war I guess. There's one more thing in this act, and all future acts for that matter. At some point, a random kid asks you to go play hide and seek and then helps you sneak into a building. Yeah, I said sneak. This game has stealth sections, a whole bunch of them. Some really, really bad. I'm sorry, I thought this was a translation puzzle game. The translation part of the game self-sabotages in the best experiences from it. The puzzles are serviceable at best, hand-holding at worst. In a game with a million long empty hallways, with a buttload of backtracking, especially in later sections, why did it feel like a stellar move to slow the gameplay down to a halt as I have to spend a few minutes staying out of some random bozo's sight? I finished this game in just under 8 hours, about an hour and a half per act. You could have got it down to 6 by just taking out a whole lot of stealth sections and backtracking. It would have been such a better experience. Alright, this is your second spoiler warning for Chants of Sennaar, because I am going to touch upon the ending. We've talked about the big things that make the first section of the game, and all other acts with the different groups of people with their own languages play out in very similar manners. Some have more upsetting stealth sections than others. This game also had this little cute system to view back previous scenes to help you translate in a quick and snappy way, but then there are sections where you spend 10 minutes watching the slowest cutscene of 3 dudes loading crates onto a cart. But sure, let's get to the ending. What's the payoff of all of this? You've made it all the way up to the tower, and the guy is there to tell you that you are the chosen one. Yes, not a joke. He created you, and you are to reunite the 5 groups of people. The people at the top built the tower, and then... I'm just going to give you the exact lines the game gives you. Foreign peoples came to tower, door closing animation, people stopped talking, peoples feared peoples, my people left in exile, we are dying, the tower is dying. I'm going to have to tension it a little bit, as is the tradition. So this is based on the story of the Tower of Babel, in case this wasn't abundantly clear yet. I just don't fully understand how we have come to almost the inverse of what that story is about. The Tower of Babel, to briefly summarize it, all peoples of the world spoke a common language, and they built a cool tower together. God gets a little concerned that they're trying to avoid being flooded again and dodge God's way of keeping his population in check. God causes everyone to speak different languages, cooperation between people becomes impossible, and the tower remains unfinished. This is also seen as a reason why there's different culture and languages globally, and this is in a way why Babel is seen as part of the beginning of civilization as we know it. As a story, not as the actual thing that happened. For some inane reason, Chants of Sennaar flips it on its head and says, the foreigners came with different languages and thus created a schism between people, now you go connect them. For the life of me, I cannot understand why this change was made. Why not have the language change and these groups of people are now the remnants of society? Then you were talking about reunion. No, now it's union. Now we have a bunch of ununited people that need to start talking, and then that solves all problems automatically. For some reason. I can keep hammering on getting frustrated on that foreign peoples came to the tower line and this caused the collapse. I won't get a satisfying answer to why this change was made, other than my suspicions that some writers' worldviews just accidentally slipped into their writing. And that's also not to say that they're bigots. Not all worldviews are created with malintent. Also, I heavily doubt this was what the writer was trying to convey. They wrote a story about reconnecting despite differences, for God's sake. Still bugs me though. And I wanted it out in the air. Tangent over. Where was I? Okay, yeah. But how do you go about to reconnect the people? Well, that's what Act 5, the final act, is mostly about. The first little bit of Act 5 is about the fifth people language, which is pretty much handed to you on a platter. You barely have to do anything for it. Then the guy on the top of the tower says you're the chosen one, blah blah blah, just the talk we just talked about. He gives you a key. The key is required to open 5 hidden doors on all floors that give access to the supercomputer that's in charge of the tower. It goes by the name Exile, and is enforcing that the people do not connect and is what's slowly causing the tower to die. You do some god-awful stealth sections, and you shut down the computer step by step behind all these doors. I'm just going to roll my eyes at the computer bad connecting people good as the payoff of the story, because this act has another component to it that I really want to talk about. You also need to go about connecting the people between the floors. And how do you do this? There will be terminals at multiple parts throughout the level. Most of the time you'll just be saving your game there, but there's also a menu option that takes you to a weird panel between 2 different people talking. You need to translate the conversations these characters are having with each other so that they can understand each other and work together. Sounds cute on paper, but unfortunately this game has shot itself in the foot for this in the very first act. Because remember when I told you that once you've confirmed all glyphs in a sentence, the game perfectly translates all words and its grammar structures for you? Well, it's relevant, horribly so. Because you need to not just translate the sentence to another language, but also make it grammatically sound. This wouldn't be an issue if the player was subjected to the grammatical structures a lot and learned how to translate them. But the player doesn't have any practice because the game did it for you. So many people are in guides for this final section struggling a lot to get this part done. Also, mind you, nothing of importance is ever spoken between these people you're translating for. They're cookie cutter stereotypes where one character will say, "Ooh, Warden said, Mrs. Music," and then a devotee will answer, "Ooh, devotee makes music with instrument, we go visit you." I guess if you really enjoy doing translation homework for your high school classes, then look no further, because that's how it feels to do this section of the game. And then people spread throughout the tower. You go to the top, and the symbol you've made by connecting people at the top of the tower is what every language uses for the word for God, just seen from different perspectives. Not really, some languages really changed it up to now to not be too obvious to the player for some reason. Cool, whatever. Couldn't care less at this point. I was already so downtrodden at this point from the most basic hero's journey with nothing of interest to say. And that sums up my major gripe with this game. It's a game all about translating, yet nobody has anything of interest to say. The devs are terrified of the players having misunderstandings about the world, and there's zero payoff in the end for any of the translation work you did. This is also not to be a total jerk and think there's no redeeming qualities for this game. Part of my frustration with this game is because I had the expectation of a translation game. If you come into this expecting just a fun little adventure puzzle game that'll keep you entertained for 2 afternoons, then sure, you could do much worse than Chants of Sennaar. We are but animals with emotions, and while I will absolutely die on the hill of Chants of Sennaar having some horrible design decisions, they are absolutely amplified by my frustration of the marketing of this game, setting my expectations for a game that Chants of Sennaar is not. Anyway, it's time to leave Chants of Sennaar behind us. I could sit here for hours pointing out every stealth mission that angered me, but these are my major observations. We're going to move on to greener, creepier pastures. At this point, it had been nearly 2 years since I've played Chants of Sennaar, and my opinion of that game only worsened over time. I spotted a random video on my feed of somebody playing a small part of Homicipher. There it was, another translation game. I was only a whole year late to the party as it released around Halloween last year. It was an instant purchase for me. I sat down, streamed it to my friends. I played it for 10 hours straight upon launching it for the first time. Also, this is your spoiler warning for Homicipher. And just like Chants of Sennaar, this section will have 2 spoiler warnings. The first one is just the basic game systems of Homicipher with mostly made up examples. Second warning will come in when I spoil the ending. Or endings in the case of Homicipher. Also, spooky vibes warning for Homicipher. I will not play any loud noises. I will show some of the visuals, but I will despook wherever I feel it's necessary. Upon launching Homicipher, the game gives you a few language options and 2 possible game modes, normal mode and otherworld mode. I've played on otherworld mode, and I would really recommend people to at the very least try that mode first. The difference between the modes is that in normal mode, the main character's thoughts and spoken language are all in English, or whatever language the game is set to. All the monsters speak the otherworld language. In otherworld mode, everything is in the otherworld language, including the main character's inner thoughts and spoken language. Normal mode also has a bunch of hints on how to do translations, especially early on, and a few of those extra hint lines are taken out in otherworld. Most people on normal mode also review this game with like 4 hours on their playtime. Otherworld mode players easily clock in over 10 hours. My takes on this game are heavily affected by me having only played otherworld mode. Let's talk menus. Upon booting up the game for the first time and being spooked by Mr. Scrolling, you can hop into the menus. You have some options for dictionary, profiles, chapters, backlog, controls, endings, and 2 other for volume and the title screen that are irrelevant to look at. The log allows you to see the last 20 lines of dialogue that were spoken, and the dictionary keeps track of any words you came across. This game, just like Chants of Sennaar, allows you to click on a word and then type in what you think the translation is. This translation will show up automatically wherever you encounter that word again. Fun note, you can even do this with the characters through the profiles menu. So the first character you run into, for example, Mr. Crawling, is referred to in my original save as Dogboy for things that make sense when you play this game. The game gives you a few really useful tips on how to play the game, although this is kind of hidden in the control section of all places. Some generally good advice on good strategies for translating, and a really good tip on how the Otherworld language works. The big tip being that the Otherworld language is unsophisticated and uses a lot of umbrella terminology for similar words. For example, and this is not a direct example from the game, when talking about a chair, or a table, or a bed, we'd use different words for it, but the Otherworld language might have only one word for all these objects. In this case, a good translation would probably be furniture. So, one scene, a person might point at a chair, you translate the word as chair, and then later it would pop up when a character would point at a table, and you'd notice your translation is off. To return to my original point, typing out manual translations for words, unlike Chants of Sennaar, however, there is no validation system for words. How do you know you translated something correctly? The old-fashioned way, by it showing up again and hoping a sentence makes sense where multiple translated words come together. Homicipher is not afraid of misunderstanding. Misunderstandings are at the core of this game's experience. You will translate words wrong initially, there's no way about it. It might make sense in the sentence you translated it in, but then later down the line you run into a character uttering a sentence and your translation will read, me however contain your flashlight. To only be given a multiple choice question right after, of which the options translate to bucket man and bucket greetings. You pick one at random and suddenly the main character explodes into 1,000 bloody bits. This game's spooky vibe is amplified by the fact that in the early game you have no idea what's happening, what the characters are saying, and why one of them suddenly killed you. Misunderstandings, while sometimes spooky, sometimes accidentally funny, make this game infinitely better. That's basically all there is system-wise to Homicipher. It's much more simple than Chants of Sennaar in that regard. It's mostly a visual novel with some branching narratives where you have to translate to even understand what's going on. Which takes us to the second spoiler warning for Homicipher. We've talked systems. I'm now going to spoil a whole lot about the characters, the world, and the endings. I think there's some interesting analysis there. So if you've been listening so far and thought to yourself, damn, I really want to play a game with some handsome, monstrous men and have a fun time learning about them and the world, you should really hop off this video for now. Just tab it out somewhere, come back to it later. Homicipher just won't be as good spoiled. I am about to pull some rugs here. Homicipher presents itself as a spooky game. It has loud noises, some jump scares here and there, and a lot of the monsters are heavily inspired by Eastern folklore. The fun thing about Homicipher is that it's actually not at all spooky. Dogboy, the poster boy of this game, is with you throughout most of the game, and while he physically does a lot of jump scares and suddenly popping around the corner, what he says most of the time is incredibly wholesome. He'll say things like, dang, be careful in this hallway, there's a nasty ghost that doesn't like people walking too quickly. Be careful, behind the door the floor is missing, don't just open it up and walk in. Dogboy at all times is wholesome and helpful. There are a few characters that are definitely bad eggs, such as Mr. Stitch and Mr. Stinky Hands, but other characters that seem scary are also just helpful. That context over here immediately tries to help you once you've walked into the scary world. Dr. Elementary teaches you some basic words because you helped his bestie knees and toes, for whom he is growing a new body. Sure, his room seems like a creepy murder room, but it's not to cut open innocent Otome main characters, what the player will likely assume, but it's where he tries to Frankenstein a body for his bestie knees and toes. Faker just likes playing games, even if he does that in the most terrifying of ways. Homicipher presents something as scary and rewards the player for overcoming their prejudices with lifelong connections and sweet moments with characters that are more misunderstood than they are scary. Except for Mr. Stinky Hands, you judged him right the first time you saw him. I've seen some criticism that the term Otome for this game is stretching, and I have both arguments in favor and against that. Sure, it's not a traditional Otome. Otomes have many more character-specific endings, often ending in sweet, sweet romance. The thing is, Homicipher is treading into monsterfucker territory. This genre of romance is not often concerned with traditional displays of romance, but is more interested in exploring how the relationship between something quote-unquote normal and something monsters would work, or sometimes combinations of two things, monsters. In that regard, I agree. Homicipher's Otome designation doesn't quite fit. On the other hand, depending on what you value in an Otome game, Homicipher does fit the bill. Otomes traditionally have a female lead, check, a big cast of mostly men, check, of which most of them you will have romance endings with, monster fucker check. It's mostly aimed at heterosexual women, because else the genre tag would be Yuri if it was more aimed at gay women. Homicipher fills a very specific niche in the market, a dating sim for heterosexual women with some monster fucker tendencies. There's not a whole lot out there for this specific niche, but Homicipher fits that niche like a glove. But Homicipher breaks the mold in more ways than one. Yes, we have some spoopy men that we have very specific relationships with, and they're all much more wholesome than their spooky vibe initially made them look. For once, the main character of an Otome is also an interesting character. The main character is initially presented to us as this classically dainty girly girl that giggles at everything and daintily screams at scary monsters. Seemingly the Otome staple. But as we progress through the game, and the longer we stay in the other world, the more monstrous the main character seems to become also. What the main character's situation is exactly is a bit shrouded in mystery, and also varies slightly based on what people think the correct translation is of some stuff in the game. To put it simply, there is this character called the Phantom in the Raincoat, a folklore creature that shows up on rainy days and has murdered a whole bunch of people. You briefly see them at a few moments in the game, and they're the only monster that can speak English. The other few pop-ups of English text are some of the news articles that the character can find in the game. At the very least, they seem to be in the main character's head, trying to take you over, if you'd like to believe that they're a separate entity. But it's also implied that the main character is this monstrous creature from the get-go, that they are one and the same. You can get so strong in this game that you are capable of killing anything by just flicking your hand at them. Another twist on the Otome genre, where the main character is generally presented as this more quiet, shy, dainty type, whereas in Homicipher, they are maybe the most terrifying and strongest monster down in Hot Monster Town. It's also fun in that regard that the scary thing turned out to be not scary, but the things you thought you understood are actually the terrifying part. I've been praising Homicipher a whole lot, and I truly wish it was a perfect game. I enjoyed it massively. I do have some criticism. Homicipher does have a bit of a rough time sticking its landing. It has a bunch of endings. On the ending screen it looks like there's a whole lot, but in reality there's like 5 major paths, of which one is more the canon ending as it takes care of the main antagonist Rihanna, has most of the main character's background information, and also leads to in a later added update ending called Reunion. Hunting these 20 or so extra endings is not great, nor do most of them add anything to the overall story. They are pretty abrupt ends, and some characters are left with a brutally little screen time. Which also means you can have the highlight of the major ending early, and then you kind of have a fuzzy last hour of play or so when you use a guide to find some of the obscure endings that don't add a whole lot of extra stuff. All in all, Homicipher was an absolute delight to play, did a bunch of interesting stuff, and fumbled a bit in its final hour and half of gameplay. It's probably going to end up in second place on my Game of the Year list, which was unexpected to me too. I would die for Dog Boy at this point. And that concludes my analysis of both Chants of Sennaar and Homicipher. From a game that I looked forward to playing and severely let me down, to a game that took me completely off guard and ended up incredibly high on my favorite games list of the year. Chants of Sennaar fumbled its core design and padded its gameplay heavily with unnecessary backtracking and stealth sections, and while it stated that it was all about communication, it could not convey this through its gameplay and ultimately had nothing to say. Homicipher did not only welcome misunderstandings, it used it to its maximum potential to change what would otherwise be an average monster fucker Otome into a scarier game, and thoroughly got across its message of through understanding do we stop judging and start working together. This has been another one of my videos. Thank you for sticking to the end.